Captain Lisa Morgan stood on the bridge of her ship, watching the enemy vessels get closer and closer. The horizon's edge was a big transport ship, but it was not built for fighting. It carried 3,000 people who were running away from their destroyed home world. Families with small children, old people, young couples hoping for a new life somewhere safe. All of them were now in terrible danger. The alien ships that hunted them were called Krithik. They were known throughout the galaxy as raiders who took people as slaves. Their ships were fast and deadly. They had already destroyed the military escort ships that were supposed to protect the transport. Now nothing stood between the Krithak and 3,000 innocent lives. Jake Martinez worked at the communications station. His hands moved quickly over the controls, trying to call for help. Sweat ran down his face as he searched for any Federation ships in the area. He shook his head and looked at the captain with fear in his eyes. No one is answering, Captain. The nearest Federation fleet is too far away. They cannot reach us in time. Lisa felt her heart sink. She had been a captain for 15 years, but never faced anything like this. The people on her ship trusted her to keep them safe. Children were sleeping in the lower decks, not knowing that death was coming for them. Parents held their babies close and looked to her for answers she did not have. The tactical display showed 12 Krithik ships moving in a perfect hunting formation. They would surround the transport ship and board it. Then they would take everyone as slaves. The lucky ones would die quickly. The others would wish they had. Lisa remembered something she had heard in the darkest corners of military bases. Stories about special soldiers who operated far from Federation space. They called themselves the Wolf Pack. These were humans who had changed themselves into something more than human. They were faster and stronger and deadlier than any normal person could be. The Federation used them for missions too dangerous for regular troops. Most officers pretended the Wolf Pack did not exist. The stories about them were too frightening. People who had seen them work spoke in whispers. They said the wolves could tear apart enemy ships with their bare hands. They said the wolves had given up their humanity to become living weapons. They said that asking for help from the Wolf Pack meant you were desperate enough to make a deal with monsters. Lisa was that desperate now. She opened a secret military channel that she had been given years ago, but told never to use. Her hands shook as she entered the codes. The channel was only for the most extreme emergencies. Using it meant admitting that the Federation could not save them. It meant calling for help from beings that might be more dangerous than the enemies they faced. The communications equipment crackled with static. Lisa took a deep breath and spoke into the microphone. This is Captain Lisa Morgan of the civilian transport, Horizon's Edge. We are carrying 3,000 civilians, including 800 children. We are under attack by Krithik raiders. Our escort ships are destroyed. We have no weapons and no way to defend ourselves. If anyone can hear this message, please help us. We are begging you. The bridge fell silent. Even the normal sounds of the ship seemed quieter. Everyone waited to see if anyone would answer their desperate call. The Krithik ships were getting closer. Soon they would be close enough to use their weapons. Then a voice came through the speakers. It did not sound completely human. There was something mechanical about it, like the person speaking had machines inside their throat. The voice was deep and cold and sent chills down everyone's spine. Captain Morgan, this is Alpha of Wolf Pack 7. We have received your message. Send us your exact location right now. Lisa stared at the communications panel. Part of her felt relief that someone had answered. Another part of her wondered what kind of beings she had just contacted. The stories about the Wolf Pack said they were more machine than human now. They said the wolves felt no emotions and showed no mercy even to their allies. But the Krithik ships were almost in weapons range. She could see them preparing to fire. In a few minutes, her ship would be crippled and boarded. The children in the lower decks would be dragged away screaming. She had no choice. "Our coordinates are being transmitted now," Lisa said into the microphone. "Understood, Captain. Keep your people away from the outer hull. Do not leave your ship under any circumstances. We are coming." The transmission ended. The bridge crew looked at each other with mixed expressions of hope and fear. They had called for help, and help was coming. But what kind of help would it be? Security Chief Amy Chun had heard the same stories about the wolf pack that everyone else had. She walked over to the captain with worry on her face. "Captain, are you sure about this? The stories say that people who work with the wolf pack are never the same afterward." Lisa looked at the tactical display again. The Krithek ships were moving into attack position. She could see weapons charging on their hulls. In minutes they would open fire. "Amy, we have 3,000 people on this ship. If the wolf pack can save them, then I will deal with whatever comes after. Tell all department heads to secure their areas and prepare for possible combat." The crew moved quickly to follow orders. Parents in the passenger areas gathered their children close. The elderly were moved to the most protected parts of the ship. Everyone waited to see what would happen when the mysterious wolf pack arrived. Lisa stood at the center of the bridge, trying to look calm and confident. Inside, she was terrified. She had made the call that might save them all. Or she might have just invited something worse than the Krithek onto her ship. Soon she would find out which one it was. The space around the horizon's edge suddenly exploded with violence. The wolf pack arrived not in normal ships, but in vessels that seemed to bend light around them. Lisa could barely see them on the main screen. They moved like shadows through space, appearing and disappearing as they attacked the Krithek raiders. There were only 3 wolf pack ships against 12 enemy vessels, but the battle was over before Lisa could understand what was happening. The Krithek ships that had seemed so threatening moments before were now floating debris. Some had been cut in half by weapons that moved faster than the eye could follow. Others had simply exploded as if their own power systems had been turned against them. The wolf pack ships moved with impossible grace. They did not fly like machines, but like living creatures hunting prey. Lisa watched in amazement and horror as they tore through the Krithek formation without taking a single hit in return. Then the boarding alarm started ringing throughout the transport ship. Lisa felt panic rise in her chest until she realized that some Krithek warriors had already made it aboard before their ships were destroyed. They were loose somewhere in the corridors of her ship with 3,000 defenseless people. Security teams to decks 5 through 8. Amy Chun called over the ship's communication system. "We have hostile boarders, but before any human security officers could reach the invaded areas, the wolf pack was already there." Lisa did not see them board her ship. One moment the corridors were empty, except for Krithek raiders. The next moment the aliens were dead, and 3 figures in dark armor stood over their bodies. The security cameras showed Lisa her first real look at the beings who had saved them. They were still shaped like humans, but everything else about them had changed. Alpha was the tallest, nearly 7 feet of muscle and machinery combined into something that moved with perfect, deadly grace. His armor seemed to be alive, pulsing with its own heartbeat and shifting color to match his surroundings. His eyes glowed with bright blue light that seemed to look right through the camera and into Lisa's soul. When he spoke to his team members, his voice carried strange harmonics that made the speakers buzz and crackle. The other 2 were just as frightening. Beta moved like liquid shadow, her body bending in ways that no normal human could manage. Her hands ended in claws that could, apparently, cut through alien armor like paper. The 3rd member, called Gamma, had weapons built into his arms that folded out when he needed them and disappeared back into his flesh when the fighting was done. They worked together with perfect coordination. No words were needed between them. They seemed to share thoughts and moved as one organism with 3 bodies. In less than 5 minutes, every Krithik raider on the ship was dead, and the wolf pack members were walking toward the bridge. Lisa tried to prepare herself to meet them, but nothing could have made her ready for Alpha's presence when he entered her bridge. He was enormous and radiated an aura of controlled violence that made everyone step back without thinking about it. His glowing eyes examined each crew member in turn, as if he was deciding whether they were threats that needed to be eliminated. "The immediate danger has been removed, Captain," Alpha said in his mechanical voice. "But this attack was only the beginning. The Krithik have marked your ship as valuable prey. They will not give up easily." Lisa found her voice after a moment of stunned silence. "Thank you for saving us. We owe you our lives." Alpha tilted his head like a predator studying something interesting. "The debt has not been settled yet, Captain. To truly protect your people, we must ensure they can never be hunted successfully again. Are you prepared to do whatever is necessary?" Behind Alpha, Beta and Gamma stood perfectly still, but Lisa could feel their attention focused on her, like the weight of loaded weapons. Every instinct told her to be very careful with her next words. "What do you mean?" Lisa asked. "The Krithik will return with more ships," Beta said in a voice that sounded like music played through broken speakers. "Other raiders will learn about your cargo of defenseless humans. Running away is not a permanent solution." Gamma stepped forward, and his arm weapons partially extended with soft mechanical sounds. "We can escort you to the nearest Federation base, but that will only delay the inevitable. The raiders know you exist now. They will follow and wait for another opportunity." Lisa looked around at her crew. Jake Martinez still worked at his communications station, but she could see fear in his eyes. Amy Chun stood ready to fight, but her human weapons would be useless against the enemies they faced. Chief Engineer Danny Torres watched the wolf pack members with the fascination of someone seeing impossible technology made real. "What other choice do we have?" Lisa asked. Alpha moved closer, and Lisa had to force herself not to step backward. Up close she could see that his armor was not just covering his body, but seemed to be part of his skin. Cables and wires ran under the surface like artificial veins. His blue eyes never blinked and never looked away from her face. "We can make your ship untouchable, Captain. We can give your crew the tools they need to defend themselves and your passengers. But the process requires sacrifice." "What kind of sacrifice?" Beta answered this time. "Enhancement, modification, evolution. Your crew can become more than human. But they will also become less than what they are now." Lisa felt cold spreading through her chest. She had heard rumors about what the wolf pack recruitment process involved. People went inhuman and came out as something else entirely. Most never spoke about what they had lost in the transformation. "Enhanced how?" she asked. "Faster reflexes, greater strength, modified sensory systems, direct neural interfaces for weapon control and tactical coordination. Basic combat programming downloaded into their brain tissue." Gamma listed these modifications like he was reading a shopping list. "And if we refuse, then you remain defensible only as long as we stay with you," Alpha replied. "But we have other missions, other people who need saving. Eventually, you will be alone again, and the Krithik will be waiting." The bridge fell silent, except for the quiet hum of ship systems. Lisa looked at her crew again. These were good people who had signed up to help families reach new homes safely. They had not volunteered to become living weapons. But 3,000 lives depended on whatever decision she made in the next few minutes. Danny Torres stepped forward first. His voice was steady, but Lisa could see his hands shaking slightly. "Captain, if it means protecting those families, then I volunteer." Amy Chun nodded and moved to stand beside him. "Count me in too." One by one, the other bridge crew members stepped forward. Jake Martinez looked terrified but determined. Navigator Paul Johnson wiped sweat from his forehead, but his jaw was set with resolve. They were all afraid, but they were all willing to sacrifice themselves for the people depending on them. Alpha watched this display of human courage with something that might have been approval in his glowing eyes. The enhancement process will begin immediately. Captain, you will need to decide whether you will join your crew in this transformation. The medical bay of the Horizon's Edge had been completely transformed by the wolf pack in just a few hours. What used to be a simple treatment facility now looked like something from a nightmare. Strange machines with too many arms and cutting. Tools lined the walls. Cables snaked across the floor, connecting devices that hummed with unknown power. The air smelled of ozone and something metallic that made Lisa's stomach turn. Beta worked at one of the machines, with movements too quick and precise for normal human eyes to follow. Her hands moved through holographic displays that showed complex diagrams of human anatomy. But these were not normal medical charts. They showed where machines would be inserted into flesh and how organic tissue would be replaced with synthetic alternatives. The process is not reversible, Captain, Alpha warned as Lisa stood at the entrance to the modified medical bay. Once your crew undergoes enhancement, they will never again be fully human. Lisa watched Danny Torres lying unconscious on one of the surgical tables. Mechanical arms moved around his body with surgical precision. She could see small incisions being made along his spine and at the base of his skull. Thin cables were being inserted into his nervous system while his brain activity was monitored on nearby screens. "How long will it take?" she asked. 6 hours per individual for basic combat enhancement, Gamma replied, while monitoring Danny's vital signs. "We have modified the standard Wolfpack protocols to be less invasive, but the core changes remain the same." Lisa tried not to think about what core changes meant. She had seen how the Wolfpack members moved and sounded. They were incredibly effective, but they no longer seemed completely alive in the way normal humans were alive. There was something cold and mechanical about them that went deeper than just their enhanced bodies. Amy Chun was next on the surgical table. She had been unconscious for 3 hours while machines worked inside her head and spine. Her body looked the same as always, but Lisa could see new scars along her neck where ports had been installed. Small lights blinked under her skin where monitoring devices had been implanted. "What exactly are you doing to them?" Lisa asked. Beta paused in her work and turned to face the captain. Her movements were fluid like water, but there was nothing natural about the way she held her head or positioned her arms. Everything about her seemed calculated for maximum efficiency. "We are installing direct neural interfaces that will allow rapid information processing and tactical coordination. Enhanced muscle fibers are being grown throughout their skeletal system. Their sensory organs are being modified to detect threats across a broader spectrum. Basic combat programming is being written directly into their brain tissue," Lisa felt sick listening to this clinical description of how her crew members were being changed into something else. But she could still hear the voices of children playing in the passenger areas below. 3,000 people were depending on these modifications to keep them safe. Will they still be themselves afterward? Alpha looked up from another surgical table where Jake Martinez was being prepared for enhancement. They will retain their memories and core personality structures, but their priorities and emotional responses will be altered to support their new function as protectors. What does that mean? It means they will care more about completing their mission than about their own comfort or happiness. Personal relationships will become secondary to tactical considerations. They will make decisions based on logic rather than emotion. Lisa watched the surgical machines work on her communications. "Officer, Jake had been dating Amy Chun for 2 years. They had talked about getting married when they reached their destination. Now Lisa wondered if they would still care about each other when the enhancements were complete. The first crew member to wake up was Danny Torres. Lisa was shocked by the change in him, even though his physical appearance was almost the same. His eyes now had flecks of the same blue glow that marked all Wolf Pack members. When he moved, there was a mechanical precision to his actions that had never been there before. "Enhancement process complete, Chief," Danny reported to Lisa in a voice that carried subtle electronic undertones. "All systems functioning within normal parameters." Lisa stared at him. Danny had always been a cheerful person who made jokes while he worked and treated everyone like family. The man sitting in front of her now spoke like a machine giving a status. "Report. Danny, are you feeling all right? All physical and mental functions are operating at optimal levels, Captain. I am ready to resume my duties with enhanced capabilities." There was no warmth in his voice, no recognition of their years of friendship. Danny looked at her with the same professional detachment he might show to any superior officer. Lisa realized, with growing horror, that whatever made Danny who he was had been buried under layers of programming and modification. Amy Chun woke up an hour later with the same changes. Her eyes glowed faintly blue, and her voice had acquired the same mechanical undertones. When Jake Martinez tried to hold her hand, she pulled away and studied him with analytical interest instead of the love Lisa had seen between them before. Personal attachments could compromise mission effectiveness, Amy stated matter-of-factly. Emotional responses must be regulated to maintain tactical advantage. Jake looked hurt and confused. His own enhancement was scheduled for the next day, but Lisa could see that he was already having doubts about what they were doing to themselves. One by one, the bridge crew emerged from the enhancement process, changed in ways that went far beyond their new physical capabilities. They moved with perfect coordination now, but they had lost the easy camaraderie that had made them feel like a family during their long journey through space. Navigator Paul Johnson no longer made small talk during his shifts. He worked with mechanical efficiency and spoke only when necessary to report navigation data. The jokes and stories that used to make the long hours pass more quickly were gone completely. When it was Lisa's turn to undergo enhancement, she lay on the surgical table, staring up at the mechanical arms that would soon be working inside her brain. Alpha stood beside her, preparing the anesthesia equipment. "Captain, there is still time to change your mind," he said in his distorted voice. "You could remain unenhanced and still command your modified crew." Lisa thought about this option. She could stay human while her crew became something else. But how could she lead people whose thoughts and priorities had been fundamentally altered if she could not understand how those alterations worked? "No," she said firmly. "If my crew is making this sacrifice, then I will make it too." Alpha nodded with what might have been respect. "The enhancement process will begin now, Captain. When you wake up, you will be something new." The anesthesia flowed into her bloodstream, and Lisa felt consciousness slipping away. Her last thought as a fully human being was wondering if she would still care about the 3,000 people she was trying to protect. When the machines were finished changing her brain, when she woke up 6 hours later, the first thing Lisa noticed was how clearly she could see everything around her. Colors were more vivid, and she could detect heat signatures from across the room. Her hearing had become so sensitive that she could monitor conversations happening 3 decks away. But more disturbing was the change in how she felt about things. The desperate emotional need to protect her passengers had been replaced by a calm, logical understanding that their survival was her primary mission objective. She still wanted to save them, but the feeling was clinical rather than personal. Lisa stood up from the surgical table and found that her body moved with new grace and power. She could feel the enhanced muscle fibers throughout her frame and sensed the data connections that now linked her brain directly to the ship's computer systems. "Enhancement process complete," she reported to Alpha. All systems functioning within acceptable parameters. As soon as she said it, Lisa realized that she sounded exactly like her crew members had when they woke up. The warm humanity that had defined her personality for 43 years had been replaced by cold efficiency. 3 days after the enhancement process was complete, Lisa began to understand what they had truly lost. She stood in the observation deck, watching her crew run security drills, and felt nothing but analytical satisfaction at their improved performance. The emotional connections that had once made them feel like family were gone completely. Vanny Torres moved through the engineering section with mechanical precision, checking systems and making repairs with inhuman efficiency. He no longer hummed while he worked or told stories about his childhood. On Earth, when other crew members tried to make conversation with him, he responded with brief, technical updates and nothing more. The change was even more obvious with Amy, Chun, and Jake Martinez. Before their enhancement, they had been planning to get married at their destination. They had spent hours talking about their future together and supporting each other through the stress of their dangerous journey. Now they worked together with perfect tactical coordination, but showed no signs of personal affection. Lisa watched Amy give Jake a mission briefing about patrol schedules. There was no warmth in her voice and no recognition of their previous relationship. Jake listened to the orders with the same detached professionalism and responded with a simple acknowledgement. They might have been strangers who had just met. The most disturbing mark was that Lisa could observe these changes without feeling upset about them. Her enhanced brain understood that personal relationships were less important than mission effectiveness. The logical part of her mind approved of how much more efficient her crew had become. But somewhere deep inside, a small voice that sounded like her old self was screaming. Alpha found her in the observation deck late one evening when the ship was running on night cycle. The Wolf Pack leader moved silently through the corridors and appeared beside her without making any sound. Lisa's enhanced hearing detected his approach, but she felt no surprise or alarm at his sudden presence. "You are troubled, Captain," Alpha observed in his mechanical voice. "I am analyzing the psychological changes in my crew," Lisa replied automatically. "The enhancement process has eliminated emotional bonds that previously contributed to unit cohesion." Alpha studied her with his glowing blue eyes. "Is that analysis accurate, or is it a rationalization for feelings you can no longer properly process?" Lisa considered this question with the logical part of her enhanced mind. The answer surprised her because it suggested that some trace of her original personality was still present beneath the programming. "Both assessments contain elements of truth," she admitted. "I retain memory of previous emotional attachments, but can no longer access the feelings associated with those memories. Tell me about your crew before the enhancement." Alpha requested Lisa found herself describing Danny's sense of humor and Amy's caring nature and Jake's enthusiasm for exploration. As she spoke, she could remember these traits clearly, but they felt like information about strangers rather than people she had cared about. They were more than just efficient workers, she concluded. They brought joy and warmth to our journey. Now they function perfectly, but something essential has been lost. Alpha was quiet for several minutes. When he finally spoke, there was something different about his voice. The mechanical distortion was still there, but underneath it, Lisa detected what might have been sadness. "I was once Lieutenant Commander Ryan Beck of the Federation Marine Corps," Alpha said slowly. "I commanded a unit of normal human soldiers on the frontier worlds. We were stationed at Kepler Station when the Krithik invasion began." Lisa's enhanced memory systems automatically accessed historical data about the Kepler Station massacre. 15,000 civilians had been killed or taken as slaves. The military garrison had fought to the last person, but could not stop the overwhelming alien assault. "I had a wife named Helen and a daughter named Sophie," Alpha continued. "Helen taught music at the colony school. Sophie was 7 years old and wanted to. be a starship pilot when she grew up. They were killed in the first wave of the attack. Lisa processed this information and understood why Ryan Beck had volunteered for the Wolf Pack Enhancement Program. The logical decision would have been to gain enough power to prevent other families from suffering the same loss. The enhancement process gave me abilities far beyond any normal human, Alpha explained. I became fast enough to dodge plasma bolts, strong enough to tear apart battle armor with my bare hands. My tactical processing capabilities allowed me to coordinate complex battles across multiple star systems. And you saved many lives with these abilities, Lisa observed. Thousands of lives, Captain. Maybe tens of thousands. I became exactly what the Federation needed to fight enemies that normal humans could not defeat. But the price was higher than I expected. Alpha turned to look directly at her, and Lisa saw something in his glowing eyes that her enhanced senses could barely detect. Pain, grief, emotions that his modifications should have eliminated, but somehow still existed deep inside him. I can no longer remember what Helen's laugh sounded like, Alpha said quietly. When I look at pictures of Sophie, I feel nothing but abstract knowledge that she was genetically related to me. The enhancement gave me the power to protect humanity. But it took away my ability to understand why humanity was worth protecting. Lisa felt her own enhanced systems struggling to process this information. The logical part of her mind noted that emotional attachments could compromise tactical effectiveness. But the small voice of her original self recognized the tragedy of Alpha's situation. "Do you regret the choice you made?" she asked. "Regret requires emotional investment in alternative outcomes," Alpha replied. "I am no longer capable of that level of feeling. But I can recognize that something valuable was lost in the process of gaining something necessary." They stood together in silence, watching the stars pass by outside the observation windows. Lisa found herself thinking about the 3,000 passengers sleeping in the lower decks, families with children who depended on her modified crew for protection, people who still experienced joy and love and hope in ways that she could no longer fully understand. "Will my crew continue to change?" Lisa asked. "The enhancement process includes adaptive algorithms," Alpha explained. "Your neural modifications will continue to optimize themselves based on mission requirements. Over time, you may become even less human than you are now." Lisa processed this information without the emotional distress that her original self would have felt. But she could still recognize the implications for her crew's future development. "Or we might evolve in a different direction," she suggested. "The Wolf Pack protocols were designed for individual soldiers operating alone. My crew must function as a unit while protecting civilians. Perhaps our enhancements will adapt to those different requirements." Alpha tilted his head with what might have been interest. "That is a possibility we did not consider. Your crew represents something new in our experience. Enhanced humans who retain some connection to the people they protect." Lisa looked down at her hands and noticed that the blue glow in her fingernails was slightly different from the color patterns she had seen in other Wolf Pack members. Her crew was developing their own unique characteristics as their enhancements adapted to their specific mission requirements. "We are becoming something that has never existed before," she realized. "Not fully human, but not identical to the wolf pack either. Evolution rarely follows predictable paths, Captain," Alpha agreed. "Perhaps your crew will find a way to retain more of their humanity while still gaining the power needed to protect others." Lisa felt something that might have been hope stirring in the enhanced circuits of her modified brain. It was not the warm, emotional hope she remembered from her previous life, but it was something more than cold logical analysis. Maybe they had not lost everything that mattered. Maybe they were just changing into something new that could bridge the gap between human weakness and mechanical strength. Time would tell what they were becoming. 6 months had passed since the enhancement process, and the horizon's edge had become something unprecedented in the galaxy. The ship moved through the most dangerous sectors of space without fear. Raiders who saw its approach changed course and fled rather than risk confrontation with what they had learned to call the ghost ship. Lisa stood on the bridge, watching her crew work with a mixture of pride and sadness that her enhanced emotions could barely process. They had proven themselves in 4 separate encounters with hostile forces. Each time they had emerged victorious through a combination of tactical brilliance and abilities that no normal human crew could match. But something else was happening that even Alpha had not predicted. Her crew was developing new behaviors and traditions that had nothing to do with their original programming. They communicated through subtle gestures and brief exchanges that carried far more meaning than the actual words being spoken. Danny Torres had started modifying their weapon systems in ways that were not covered in any technical manual. His enhancements had given him an intuitive understanding of technology that bordered on supernatural. The improvements he made increased their defensive capabilities by 30%, but he could not explain how he knew what changes to make. Amy Chun had developed her own tactical protocols that combined human intuition with enhanced processing power. She could predict enemy movements with an accuracy that impressed even the Wolf Pack members. But her methods did not follow standard military doctrine and seemed to come from some deeper understanding of combat psychology. Jake Martinez had found ways to maintain ship morale despite the emotional limitations of the enhanced crew. He organized efficiency competitions and skill demonstrations that gave the modified humans something resembling satisfaction. It was not the same as the joy they had felt before, but it was more than the cold, mechanical fulfillment their programming provided. Navigator Paul Johnson had begun creating star charts that included tactical information about every system they visited. His enhanced memory could store details about defensive positions, escape routes, and hidden dangers that might be useful to other ships carrying refugees. He was building a database that could help save thousands of lives. Lisa realized that her crew was not just following their programming anymore. They were growing and adapting in ways that created something entirely new. They were becoming their own unique form of enhanced humanity. The test of their evolution came when they received a distress signal from another transport ship. The New Horizon was under attack by Krithik raiders in the Vega sector. They carried 2,000 civilians and had no military escort. Amy Chun brought the message to Lisa with an expression that showed more emotion than she had displayed since her enhancement. Not the warm concern she would have felt as a normal human, but something that might have been protective instinct amplified by her modifications. Captain, we can reach their position in 8 hours if we push the engines to maximum capacity, Amy reported. But helping them will require us to engage a full Krithik battle group. Lisa studied the tactical data on her command screen. The New Horizon faced impossible odds. Their crew had no enhanced abilities, and their ship carried no serious weapons. Without help, every person aboard would be dead or enslaved within hours. The logical response would be to inform Federation authorities and continue on their own mission. Lisa's enhanced brain calculated that risking their ship to save strangers was not tactically sound, but something deeper than logic was driving her decision-making process. Set course for the Vega sector, Lisa ordered. Maximum speed, her crew responded to the order with an efficiency that would have impressed any military commander. But Lisa noticed something else in their movements. Eagerness, purpose. They wanted to help these people, and not just because their programming told them to protect civilians. Alpha had remained aboard the Horizon's Edge to study how their unique enhancements were developing. He approached Lisa as the ship prepared to jump to hyperspace. Captain, this rescue mission is not required by your original orders, Alpha observed. Why are you choosing to risk your ship and crew? Lisa considered the question carefully. Her enhanced mind could analyze the tactical situation with perfect clarity. They were choosing to fight overwhelming odds to save people they had never met. The logical response would be to prioritize their own survival and the safety of their existing passengers. But something in her modified consciousness rebelled against that cold calculation. The enhancement process had changed her, but it had not eliminated every trace of what she used to be. Those traces were growing stronger rather than weaker as time passed. Because someone needs to, Lisa replied simply. And we have the power to make a difference. Alpha studied her with his glowing blue eyes for several long moments. That response suggests your enhancements are evolving in unexpected directions, Captain. Standard Wolf Pack protocols would prioritize mission completion over humanitarian concerns. We are not Standard Wolf Pack, Lisa pointed out. We are something new that jumped to hyperspace engaged with smooth precision, and the horizon's edge raced toward another desperate battle. Lisa felt something stirring in her enhanced consciousness that might have been hope. Not the warm, emotional hope of her previous life, but something harder and more determined. Her crew had found a way to retain purpose and meaning despite their modifications. They had discovered that protecting others gave their existence significance beyond mere tactical objectives. They were becoming guardians rather than just soldiers. When they dropped out of hyperspace near the new horizon, the battle was already underway. Krithik ships surrounded the helpless transport, while boarding parties prepared to storm aboard. The civilian crew was sending increasingly desperate pleas for help that no one seemed to be answering. Lisa's enhanced crew moved with perfect coordination to engage the enemy. Their ship danced through the Krithak formation, using tactics that no normal human crew could have executed. Danny's modified weapons systems tore through alien armor like paper. Amy's tactical predictions allowed them to stay one step ahead of enemy fire. But the most remarkable thing was how they fought as a unit. There was no hierarchy of command needed because they all understood the mission at the same level. They shared information and coordinated their actions through the subtle communication methods they had developed over the past months. In 20 minutes, the Krithik battle group was destroyed, and the new horizon was safe. But Lisa knew this was just the beginning. Word would spread about what they had accomplished. Other ships in danger would call for help. Her crew would answer those calls because that was what they had chosen to become. Alpha found her in the observation deck after the battle. The Wolf Pack leader seemed different somehow, less mechanical and more thoughtful than she had ever seen him before. Your crew has accomplished something remarkable, Captain, Alpha said quietly. They have found a way to retain purpose and compassion despite their enhancements. They are showing us a path we never considered. Lisa looked out at the stars and thought about the future. Her crew would continue to evolve and adapt. They would save other ships and other families. Some of those they rescued might choose enhancement themselves and join their growing ranks. We asked you to save us, Lisa said to Alpha. You did. But not in the way we expected. Instead of just preserving our